Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. And when she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's Eponine, aka Epi, aka we're gonna do something a little dark and mysterious today. And we are gonna talk about the case of Lizzie Borden. Did she do it? Did she not do it? Will we ever really know? So for those of you who don't know of Lizzie Borden, I'm going to tell you about her. For those of you who have heard about Lizzie Borden, hopefully you're able to learn something new. I learned a lot of things I did not know about her while researching this case. Buckle in, because this is a good one. It's exciting, it's entertaining, it's controversial. Makes you think. I like it. So Lizzie Andrew Borden was born on July 19th, 1960. That's not right. She was not born in 1960. So Lizzie Andrew Borden was born on July 19th of 1860 in a town called Fall River, Massachusetts. Now her father Andrew was a well-off banker who was pretty wealthy, and her mother's name was Sarah. Now there was a middle sister, but she passed away when she was an infant. And when Lizzie was only 3, her mother Sarah actually passed away. 3 years later, Andrew Borden remarried to a woman named Abby. But this was not really a marriage out of love. It was more a marriage out of necessity. Andrew Borden had to have a wife. He had to have somebody to help take care of his daughters and the house and things like that. And Abby Borden was a spinster. So at this point, she still had not been married. She had no kids of her own. And back in the day, that was pretty highly frowned upon. That wasn't something that you wanted to be, was unmarried and without children. So for the sake of both of them, they decided to get married. Now, growing up, the Borden family did have a pretty good amount of money. As I mentioned earlier, Andrew Borden was a banker, so he was pretty wealthy, but he was also pretty frugal and didn't really like to spend his money. And because of this, Lizzie spent a lot of her life growing up just really jealous of the other families around her. They made the same amount of money, but she didn't have like really nice clothes, really fancy things. Instead, she got to live knowing that they had the money for it. Her father just didn't want to spend it. And that was pretty rough for her. Along with that, growing up was just kind of rough. Andrew Borden was really strict, so growing up, Lizzie and her sister really were not allowed to go out and socialize and just do kind of the normal things that teenage girls would want to do. Instead, they were pretty much limited to church and school. That was it. That was what they could go do. And because of this, Lizzie grew up just feeling really restricted and almost got kind of resentful. Now, due to her limited allowance from her father, he didn't let her spend money uncontrollably. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, he was frugal. So he gave her a small allowance to live off of, but this was not enough for Lizzie. She wanted a life full of wealth and luxury. She wanted to show off these nice items. She wanted to be kind of on the same playing field as all of her other friends who are doing well. So she actually started shoplifting. And this is where it did come in handy that her father had a lot of money, because every time the shop owner would notice that something got stolen, he would just bill the dad and the dad would pay for it. Now, even though Lizzie and her dad didn't have the greatest relationship and they weren't super close, she did love and respect him a lot, and it's believed that that was reciprocated. Sarah and Lizzie, however, did not get along very well. They fought a lot, they argued a lot, there was a lot of anger and tension and animosity between the two of them, and it just put up a little bit of a divide between them. And this made it pretty clear to everybody in town that they didn't get along. It wasn't a secret at all. Now, in the months leading up to the famous murders, strange things started happening around the Borden household. The residence was broken into and there was items stolen during broad daylight, which is really unheard of at this time. There was money and jewelry stolen only from Mrs. Borden, from nobody else. An investigation was started, but it was called off a week later by Andrew Borden. So they think that maybe one of the daughters was behind it, and Andrew found out and decided to not press charges or have anything crazy happen. But regardless of what happened, after that event, every door started getting locked in the Borden house. But Andrew Borden kept the key in plain sight, which doesn't seem like the safest thing, but whatever. In addition, on the first few days in August, everyone in the Borden house started getting sick. Sarah had thought originally that maybe it was something in the bread from the baker that was making them sick. And then she was thinking that maybe somebody poisoned their milk. They didn't know what it was or who it was or why it was happening, but suspicions were pretty high at this time. So now comes the fateful day of August 4th, 1892. The day started out really normal. Lizzie didn't eat breakfast with her family, but this wasn't uncommon for her to skip out and to eat on her own. Emma was out of town visiting family. Lizzie's dad went to work. Her uncle was visiting family. And Sarah Borden had asked the maid to clean the windows, the inside and the outside. So everything was just normal. Everybody was going about their normal daily activities. Nothing crazy, except for later that day, Lizzie's father and stepmother were found dead in their house, and they had been brutally axed to death. Now, let's get into a little bit more detail. It is believed that Sarah Borden was killed in the guest bedroom sometime between 9 and 9:30 in the morning. Andrew Borden returned from work shortly before 11, and he tried to go into the house through the side door, but it was locked. He then tried to get into the house through the front door, and the maid heard Andrew trying to get in, so she unlocked the door, and she let him in through the front door. And it's reported that they heard Lizzie kind of just giggling in the stairway during this point in time. So after he was let into the house, Mr. Borden went to go lay down in the sitting room, and it was there that he was killed. When he was discovered, it was found that he had been hit with a hatchet 11 times. And I don't mean like just kind of hit. Like he was really, really hit with this hatchet. One of the blows was so strong that it cut his eye in half. Another blow was so strong that it had like severed his nose from his face. He had been hacked up so bad that he was beyond recognition. If you didn't know who he was, you would not have been able to identify him. Now, Mrs. Borden had been struck 19 times, and they were mostly to the back of the head. The strikes were so hard that they said Mr. and Mrs. Borden likely died by the first strike, so the additional strikes were just overkill. They were heinous, they were personal, they were aggressive, and they were not necessary. Now, the scary part is that Abby Borden was killed at around 9:30 in the morning. And they know that because her blood was kind of congealed around her body when they found her. Andrew Borden was killed around 11. They know that because his blood was still kind of dripping from the wounds. So they know that he was killed a considerable amount of time afterwards. That means that there was somebody just chilling in the house for a while. But anyway, so right after 11 o'clock, the maid heard Lizzie yelling, get down here, someone killed father with an axe. And she called the maid downstairs. So then they immediately called the cops, and the police received the first call around 11:15 or so. So really, really shortly after Andrew Borden was killed. So the first suspect in situations like these are always going to be families. So the first person that they suspected was Mr. Borden's brother, but he had an alibi, so he was ruled out. The maid was originally a suspect for just a little bit, but once it was discovered that she really had no motive to do this, she had no reason to do this, and then she was also cleared as a suspect. Now, Abby was also busy with family, had an alibi, so she was cleared as a suspect. And this just left Lizzie, who originally wasn't really a suspect, mainly because she was a woman and women didn't do things like that. If a woman's gonna kill somebody, they tend to like poison them or just do something that's a little bit cleaner. They tend to not bludgeon people to death. In addition, she had no bloodstains on her clothes, and Andrew, being a man of status like he was, there was other people who they just looked at as potential suspects before Lizzie. But that doesn't mean that she was completely ruled out, obviously. So the police did some investigating. They tried to figure out who other suspects were. And after a little bit, they realized, well, shit, this may have been Lizzie, guys. This may very well have been Lizzie Borden. So on August 9th, she was subpoenaed to the police station where they told her that she was officially a suspect. And this was also the day of her father and stepmother's funeral, which is just kind of sad. Now, after she could not provide an alibi and her story just didn't really stay straight, things started changing, she started to appear pretty guilty. So on August 11th, Lizzie Borden was officially charged with murder. And at her arraignment on August 12th, she pled not guilty. Now, one of the things that ultimately led to her arrest was not only the lack of an alibi, but also the fact that she had a motive. Shortly before the murder, Andrew Borden had changed his will and had left Lizzie and Abby each $25,000. But their stepmom was left $500,000, which is a lot of money. So that combined with the fact that she didn't like her stepmom, people knew that there were issues, yada, 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 yada. That's what led to her arrest. Now, when she was arrested, she was transferred to the Taunton County Jail in Taunton, Massachusetts, because the jail in her town just didn't have accommodations for women. Women just didn't get arrested for that many things back then. Now, she was held in this jail until June of 1893. So almost a year later, because you were not allowed to post bail on murder charges, and it just took a little bit of time for them to get this case together. So on June 5th of 1893, Lizzie's trial started in New Bedford, Massachusetts. And Lizzie's reverend accompanied her in the courthouse, and she overall looked pretty calm and collected. She had a really good legal defense team. Things just seemed to be going pretty well. Even though she was potentially up for the death penalty, Lizzie didn't seem too stressed out. However, after the prosecution argued their case and gave all the evidence, Lizzie did appear to be kind of distressed and kind of flustered, and she collapsed very dramatically. Now, after she recovered, they went through with the process of the trial. And the prosecution and the defense both just kind of struggled in this trial. The prosecution had a hard time building a case against Lizzie. It was discovered that the day before the murders happened, Lizzie was trying to buy an acid called prussic acid from one of the drugstores, but she was not able to buy it. And this was some pretty damning evidence because, as I mentioned earlier, women do tend to poison people. That's not an uncommon way for women to murder people. However, because of the timing, even though it just happened the day before the murder, they said it wasn't relevant, so they wouldn't let the prosecution use this in court. They also were not allowed to use her original testimony because at the time of that testimony, her lawyer wasn't present. But regardless of all of their issues, prosecution spent 10 days arguing their case. The defense, on the other hand, they didn't need that much time. It was reported that the dress that Lizzie had been wearing on the day of the murders had been changed before the cops got there and then burnt afterwards because she said there was paint on it. However, her burning dress that she wore on the day of murders to a lot of people looked really sketchy because it could have had blood on it. Who knows? A police officer also reported to hearing a conversation between Lizzie and Emma, where Lizzie seemed to admit that she may have done it a little bit, but nothing super crazy. A handleless hatchet was found in the basement of their house, which could have been the murder weapon. And in order to try to prove this, they actually brought the skull of Mr. and Mrs. Borden into the courthouse. They had taken the skulls and boiled them and gotten all all of the stuff off of them. And they tried to use that hatchet to insert it into the skull to see if the pieces fit together. And this apparently was really stressful for people in the courtroom, and they didn't particularly care for this, which I don't blame them. So the verdict finally came on August 13th of 1893, and it only took the jury 10 minutes to make their decision. However, it's rumored that they sat around for a little over an hour to make it seem like they didn't already have their decision made before it even started, but it's pretty clear that they did. And Lizzie Borden was actually found innocent of these murders. It's believed that Lizzie's sister Emma, her testimony, her defense of Lizzie, saying that she would never do this, and this just isn't like her, is one of the things that really, really saved her. Now, Lizzie technically was free. She was able to walk out of the courtroom that day and return back home to Falls City. Now, 6 months after the acquittal, Emma and Lizzie sold the house that they lived in together, and they moved into a really nice house in Fall River, and they named it Maplecroft. And this was Lizzie's attempt at kind of starting again and just dropping her whole image and trying to leave everything in the past. It's reported that she started going by Elizabeth at this time, so like Elizabeth, but just Lizbeth, Lizbeth. She started hosting really lavish parties at Maplecroft. Her letters would just say Lizzie Borden, Maplecroft, so that's kind of how she started presenting herself to people. And she started becoming really good friends with actors and actresses who back then didn't always have the greatest social status and reputation. But to Lizzie, it didn't matter because she was finally living the life that she had always dreamed of. She had money. She was able to spend it. She had a nice house. She had nice dresses. She had nice things. And that was just really, really important to her. Emma, however, Lizzie's sister, did not want to live this lifestyle. And in 1904, she actually packed up all of her stuff and moved away forever. She was done with Lizzie's parties. She was done with her shenanigans. She didn't want to be a part of that anymore. Although, even though she moved away and she was frustrated with her sister, it is reported that she always maintained Lizzie's innocence and always maintained the fact that she never did this and that someone killed her parents, but it was not Lizzie. So for the rest of her life, she was technically a free woman. Lizzie Borden was found not guilty. She could go live her life how she wanted, but the townspeople never really looked at her that way. They always looked at her like she was guilty. They always looked at her like she did it, and she just lived a really ostracized life of isolation and loneliness. Every year she was reminded of the crime on the anniversary, and society just really did not let her live it down. Tourists would come from all over and they wanted to see the Borden house. They wanted to see where these murders happened. Everybody talked about things, and unfortunately for Lizzie, this is just how it was until she passed away in 1927 at the age of 67. She died from heart disease and complications from surgery in Falls City, and she was married with the graved mark Lizbeth. Now, Lizzie's story is just really interesting for me to read about because it reminds me of almost like a really old like O.J. Simpson story in a sense, where this horrific murder happened and people think they know who did it, but that person was found innocent. Nobody else has ever been found. The person who was found innocent was still just kind of lived under the shadow of this crime forever. And it's interesting. I like to think that she didn't do it because people murdering their parents with hatchets is really horrible. But given the situation, I think she did do it. I don't think there's any way that a murderer could have been in the house for like 2 hours without Lizzie or somebody else noticing them. That just doesn't seem realistic to me. So, I don't know. Do you guys think she did it? Do you think she didn't do it? Do you think she's innocent? Do you think she's guilty? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really, really curious to see what your guys' thoughts on this are. So yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. I plan on doing a lot more stuff like this soon. If you guys have any true crime stories or unsolved mysteries or anything like that that you want to hear about, please let me know in the comments. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you have not already. And until next time, we'll touch base soon. Bye, guys.